Hi, I'm Abe Nadimi.
I'm Jannica Morton.
And this is episode number 3. And in this episode, we're going to cover the environment and the background that dominated the era that Leonardo da Vinci lived. So we can see what was cultivating his skills and his talents. The Becoming Da Vinci show is sponsored by the Kinetic Experience, where entrepreneurs go to have even more success and more fun in their business and life. Becoming Da Vinci.
So to learn more about the Becoming Da Vinci show, visit us at www.becomingdavinchishow.com, where you can learn all sorts of stuff about Leonardo da Vinci and what we are doing to correlate his life and his example with modern day entrepreneurs and self-directed learning.
Becoming Da Vinci. So we're going to also try something different. In our last episode, we were actually facing each other, and now we're going to try to hold a conversation with each other while twisting and speaking on the mic and rubbing our bellies at the same time while also looking at scratching our head while also looking at the camera. So for those that are interested in getting into podcasting, this is one of the challenges when it comes to a one camera setup, where it's easy, of course, to grab the footage and link it to the audio, but then you have the situation where we're not necessarily looking at each other or we're not on camera. So just something to consider. There's 2 different formats that we've tried out. One of them is this one, and the other one is on the previous episodes where we face each other, and it's more like a profile shot. And the more advanced setups get 2 to 3 cameras, but then you have the issue of syncing the videos, and we can do that. We have the talent here to do that, but we're also just trying and experimenting new things. So, you ready to dive in?
Yep.
All right. Becoming Da Vinci. Again, in this episode, we're going to continue the trend of sharing information out of Walter Isaacson's book, Leonardo da Vinci, because there's so much, again, specifically the way he wrote it, that we thought it'd be really beneficial to share with you. So, Jannica, you want to kick us off?
Yes. So one of my favorite quotes of the whole book really ties us back from Leonardo's time to this time. And it says, the 15th century of Leonardo and Columbus and Gutenberg was a time of invention, exploration, and the spread of knowledge by new technologies. In short, it was a time like our own. That is why we have much to learn from Leonardo. His ability to combine art, science, technology, the humanities, and imagination remains an enduring recipe for creativity. I love this because I'm so passionate about self-directed learning and cross-directional interests and disciplinaries. Yeah. I love that we have, what are they called? Polymorphs? Polymaths?
Polymaths.
I think it should be morph. Anyway, the Renaissance man. I love that concept because it's fascinating to me. I don't want to sit and have a conversation with someone who's just so single-mindedly focused on one thing that you get bored after a while. So in studying Leonardo, I can see so many correlations between his time and his interests and his passions with the people that I surround myself with today and the people that I consider as role models in the entrepreneurial world and innovative world. So for me, this is one of my favorite pieces of studying Leonardo so far. And then he was able to, because of his middle-class upbringing, because of his environment, because of maybe being a bastard child, who knows? But because of all of that, he has the ability to really dig deep and learn what he wants to learn and follow his passions.
Well, I think you brought up a really interesting point. You said his bastard birth, right? Mm-hmm. So the interesting part for me was that at the time, in this particular era, where he was growing up, there was middle class, had the opportunities and upward mobility. Mm-hmm. And when you think about what that normally meant for middle class children, it meant that they were able to go to very specific academies and schools.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. But the fact that Leonardo wasn't able to meant that he wasn't forced or only surrounded by a specific topic.
Right. So he had the ability to expand.
So when you think of cross-disciplinary learning and activities, it actually was kind of a by chance thing for him because of the fact that his education wasn't normal or traditional mm-hmm. in that sense. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really, really fascinating that when he comes in here and describes the fact that his era and his genius and his recipe, what the recipe for creativity is, really combining all of these different topics, which normally he would not have been exposed to.
No, or had the time to do it. When you look at today's child, they have maybe 2 hours of free time in a 24-hour day. So that doesn't give them any time to dive into any of their passions. And that's that is the typical child. So when you think about that, that's like what, maybe an hour before school and an hour after school?
Well, yeah, and the hour before school, I mean, they're dead.
It doesn't count. So then maybe if you combine them both in the evening, 2 hours, I mean, how far can you go into your passion at that point? Most of them just want to play video games or tune out because they're done from their day. So I think when you look at the combination or the relation from what Leonardo had to what we have today in that middle class, I think he was so much, lucky? He was so lucky to have that. Because today's middle class kids, they don't have that freedom.
Well, yeah,
they might have the opportunity in the education to have a structured education. They might have opportunities in their parents are set and well off enough that they aren't worried about feeding themselves or whatever, but they don't have the counter to that, which is the freedom to just pursue their passions and just be.
Absolutely. The middle class had opportunities then. Now the question is, how much does the middle class have opportunities now? And I think that's something that the United States is struggling with, right? Where we're wondering, is there that upward mobility still inside of the United States for those in the middle class?
Well, you want to think optimistically that there is. You want to say that yes, in the United States, anything's possible. It doesn't matter what your socioeconomic status is. But what we see happening is that people in the middle class get stuck. They're just like, they don't push themselves to be more. And so then they follow the norm of, okay, we go get a degree, go get a high school diploma, go get a degree, get a job, status quo, have a house, 3.2 children, whatever the number is now, go in debt and whatever. I don't think there's a push for getting beyond the middle class anymore, unless you're an out of the box thinker.
Right. I think you're probably, I was actually going to say that. I think unless you're a misfit, what is touted as the middle class road to a comfortable life actually doesn't work anymore.
No.
And I think that is actually what we're seeing because, we still have an education system, obviously, public education system. We have actually more information, access to more information than we ever had or have had. And now we're in a situation where you do that, you still come out of school, and now you're so in debt, and you really don't have any new opportunities in upward mobility. So I think upward mobility exists, but not when you follow the standard path. And the standard path used to get you into a nice, comfortable life, which is what was going on at Leonardo's time, is that if when you go through one of those standard paths and you end up in one of those old established guilds, whether it's whatever, then all of a sudden you had a pretty good life.
Yeah. Well, and they followed. It was a generational thing. So how many generations were notaries in Leonardo's family? It was handed down in a sense. That doesn't happen today.
No, it's totally a different experience now, for sure. We don't have that handing down. That thing where as a child, you hope to go into your father's profession or your mother's profession because that is your path to a comfortable life and a respected life.
Or businesses. You really don't hand down businesses anymore. It's very rare.
So what's interesting is that you're bringing up the fact that under the old guild structure that was happening when, around the time of Leonardo, that he was actually raised and transferred almost into the arts world because of the connection with Verrocchio. Right. And what's really fascinating that he was initially in this guild that was for doctors and artists, which is really an interesting concept, right? Which was founded in 1197, and it involved physicians and pharmacists. Isn't that crazy?
What is the correlation between those? Why would they do that?
I have no idea. That's what I was wondering. Like, what is the correlation?
It's because they both start with PH. That's why.
Maybe so. Definitely in Italian. Duh.
Yeah, I don't know.
And by the late 1400s, so the artists were eager to express a more distinctive status. Yeah. Right? So if it wasn't for this particular organization, Leonardo may not have had an opportunity to do what he did because the notary guild was set up in a way that you couldn't come in unless you had a legitimate birth.
Right. It was very boring. their whole structure.
But it all worked, right? So you went through what they called, I think they called it a lettered school.
Right.
And then you could come out and become ultimately a notary, which was a respected position. And you'd have a nice, comfortable life. And you were a respected middle-class member of society.
Right.
And Leonardo wasn't, but he was able to go into this guild that had all of these different people inside of it, right? And then at the same time, they start to exert themselves as, you know, the artist guild is important, in an environment in a time where being a misfit was important, and an environment where new technologies were spreading information. So what an interesting melting pot of concepts or environmental factors that contributed to what Leonardo was able to do.
Well, and it supported his natural bent in life, which was to combine all these things.
So then you think nature versus nurture.
Yeah.
So what if Leonardo Da Vinci was born to the same type of family, but in an environment that didn't allow him?
Oh, it would suck.
Right? Like there was no chance. Don't even go to art school, because if you didn't have a legitimate birth, nobody would ever commission you to do art. So you're not even allowed to go to a workshop and do an apprenticeship. So isn't that really interesting that someone like Leonardo da Vinci, I would just say my opinion is that so much of what happened in his environment directly contributed to the flourishing and the expression of his talents. And then we have to think, if that is the case, then we have to think really carefully today about what is it in our environment that is nurturing this type of talent in the next generation.
Oh, well, okay.
Or even the current generation. I mean,
just think through, if you have a 7-year-old boy who has ADHD and dyslexia, and he is put in a traditional school system where he's expected to sit at his desk for, 8 hours or some insane amount, and have a 15-30 minute lunch break and whatever, and he's not supposed to talk, and he's not supposed to move, and he's not supposed to bang his pencil on the desk. Like, how is he supposed to be creative? How is he supposed to even think about the stuff that he's interested in when all he has in his ability is to pay attention to all the rules and focus and follow? I can't imagine a Leonardo in today's world in a classroom like we have, thriving and creating and innovating.
I don't see that. I that's one thing that I really, I would say really was such an eye-opening experience as I studied Leonardo da Vinci's his ADD, which of course we don't know if he had that, right?
Right.
But the way he's described, 100%.
Yeah.
Right. Considering and then his drive for always finding out new information and going back and reapplying it into old stuff. Fascinating individual. He would be an odd person to meet today, in a sense, and a fascinating person to meet if he was at a dinner party, because I don't think he would look at things, you know, in such a white and black way.
Probably not. No, I mean,
and that's some of the things that we'll talk about as we get through this episode. So, the spread of knowledge is something that's cited in that little segment, right? The spread of knowledge by new technologies. And so, what were those? So, at the time, the printing press came out in 1450, and that means, for those that are unaware, the printing press books were already being written, but they were handwritten. And so all of a sudden now you have a mechanized way to create books faster. So they could put the letters out on this press, and they would literally move the handle, and it would ink the piece of paper, and they could move that page off and do it again and do it again. And so the printing press spread all of a sudden books. So you're still talking about a very tiny amount of books, if you think about it, versus what it has today. So at that time, that helped spread the knowledge, really quickly. And now what we have, of course, is this massive amount of information, too much information possibly, that's now readily available in our pockets. So we have now, of course, the internet, which in and of itself is amazing, because now, even without any of the other things associated with the internet, just being able to connect with another human on the other side of the world, like when the internet first came out, and sending an electronic mail sped things up so fast, and information was exchanging so quickly. But then you have, of course, smartphones, portable computers, laptops, iPads.
That's what they're called.
Yeah. I think actually, they call it a smartphone, and it's interesting because the phone function is such a tiny aspect of this. This is really a personal, portable supercomputer in your pocket. And then, of course, social media. So if you think about the fact that we have the spread of knowledge by new technologies, just like Leonardo had back in his day, and we have it even more so, right? So we actually have, in some senses, the ability to cultivate an environment for ourselves and our children that mimics in a lot of ways what Leonardo da Vinci had. And I think that's a very fascinating thread and golden thread that we're going to weave throughout all these episodes. And as we said before, this is not a historical episode like a historical show where this is us documenting the history of Leonardo da Vinci, because you could just read the book. What's fascinating for us is when we look at Leonardo da Vinci and realize we can apply all of those principles to today. We can recreate an environment today that mimics his and cultivate an environment for ourselves or our children or our loved ones that allows them to flourish.
Right. Well, it's to show the correlation between, the opportunities that are available today. 20 years ago, homeschooling was so limited, and it still is, but at least now in most states, it's allowed, and there's a lot of flexibility. Texas is awesome because you can allow your child to learn in whatever way they would like to learn. And we're seeing more and more thinking outside the box when it comes to college, when it comes to career paths. You're seeing more and more interns. You're seeing people going after skills jobs such as, mechanic work, building, that sort of thing. And there's been a big shift over the last 15 to 20 years just because people, I think it just did this big pendulum swing to everything being so structured and following this system and path, and this is the one way, but now it's going back. And for young kids to have the ability, and even teenagers, but for young kids especially, to have the ability to really dig deep and understand what they love and what they're interested in, and to build their skill set that they're naturally talented in doing is huge, because that sets their pattern for the rest of their life and for the career that they're going to choose. And I love using Leonardo as that example to show that it can be successful if you let them self-direct and learn.
So this is really leading us into something that you're going to love, which is the rise of the Misfits, because she's our resident rebel, 100%. Even if everything is agreeable, she'll have to disagree with it just so she can be a rebel. So I think
there's always another side.
Even if she agreed with it, she'll I'll have to change my opinion to argue.
Yeah. No, it's not to argue. It's to show that there's another side.
That was so good. I totally got you. So here's really fascinating, right? So he was completely a misfit.
Totally.
So he was illegitimate, gay, vegetarian.
So why is a vegetarian a misfit?
I don't know.
Okay.
I'm laughing because I'm like, I don't think I'm a misfit. I've been a vegetarian now
You're
for
totally a misfit.
9 years.
But it is, sorry.
No, I mean, he's right.
It is because the common thing to do is to eat meat.
Yeah.
It's like the regular thing, it's a natural thing. That
Well,
Yeah.
Robert bringing up a good point, because now you've heard about being a vegetarian. But if you think of 500 years ago, probably not so much.
Yeah.
I guess.
Imagine those times where there were farmers, like farming food for their families.
Yeah.
Imagine that guy saying like, no, I'm just having my garden and I'm just eating whatever.
True. Yeah.
Yeah, imagine going to a big party and a feast, and he's the only dude that doesn't want to eat the meat. Fascinating.
Yeah, you're right. Okay.
He was left-handed, which is a bit of a misfit from the sense that they used to train people not to write with their right hand when we're left-handed.
Yes.
Right?
That even happened to Scarlett, and she's only 11.
So why did you abuse your kid?
I didn't.
So
I
who was
stopped
trying
it.
who was trying to do that?
A very religious preschool.
Really? Mm-hmm. Really?
Really, really, really. Yes.
Wow. That must have been only 6 years ago. 7 years ago.
Yeah, she was 3.
Wow. So here you go. 7 years ago, a very religious preschool wanted to make your left-handed child write with her right hand.
Yes, I would not say she's left-handed. She's ambidextrous for sure. But she would gravitate, and she still does, with her left hand.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
He was easily distracted and at times heretical. So the easily distracted part, I think we'll see as a lot as we're covering the different works of art that he does, that he would start a project and then, yeah, it's a cool, and he would just leave it.
But you know what that goes with that, though, is that he was super hyper-focused. So he would pick a subject to study or to work on a piece of art, and he would work as much as he could and really deep dive into it and really, really focus. And then he would be like, oh, I'm done with it right now. And he'd go away. But it talks about how sometimes he would come back to it because, maybe.
And it was also for him, in that particular case, I think we've said this already, but it's for him, it was the fact that he was challenged by the concepts.
Yeah.
And once he figured out the concept, or he figured out how to do it, and it wasn't a challenge anymore, then he didn't want to do it. And that's why you have some of the paintings that I think he just leaves and they're not finished because he's like, I figured it out. I'm good. Yeah. And I actually have it here and I know how to do it now. And so why do I need to finish it? I want to go do new things that challenge me.
I love that.
So you think of the rise of the Misfits today, right? So we have, of course, Richard Branson, really well known for this. Steve Jobs is always well known for this. And I cited here an organization called Skunkworks. For those that don't know, Skunkworks is the group of engineers and I guess a team of other individuals, scientists, whatever, that end up creating one of their famous creations. Their first famous creation was the SR-71 Blackbird. And the concept was, the reason they call it Skunkworks is they throw these people into this working facility out in the desert. And it just kind of stunk every time you went in there because they were all sweaty. And this is like, I don't know, 60s, 70s, whatever. And they left these people alone because they wanted these people to be able to develop and innovate inside of their own organization without having to be restricted to the structure that was already present there in Lockheed. So I think that's really, really fantastic that even companies that create these kind of groups of misfits, they benefit so much from the innovation that they cause. And I think that's really an interesting concept. So Florence, Italy, flourished in the 15th century because it was comfortable with these people. So these people like Da Vinci, and had the spread of information. They were rewarding creative people. They had obviously this more fluid understanding of upward mobility inside of the middle class. And it really made us think about what are the modern places of innovation. So, of course, if you're in the United States and you think about innovation, I think really high on your list is going to be Silicon Valley.
For sure.
Obviously, right? Because so much of the technology platforms on new concepts are coming out of Silicon Valley, and especially so much of the social media stuff that has happened out of Silicon Valley. But of course, there's the push for AI technologies and so forth, and it's not like that technologies or these innovations are not happening in other parts of the country. But that's the beautiful part of the United States is we do have different centers of innovation. Seattle, Austin, Chicago, Boston. I'm sure there's more, and I don't want to upset anybody if I don't mention your city. Here, Dallas, of course. From my buddy Hal, I just want you to know Dallas is on the top. So F you, Hal. So modern places of innovation. So here is really interesting, and we're going to show an image of this. We're going to cut in an image of this. So Bloomberg came out with their rankings of the most innovative countries in 2018, and this came out January the 22nd, 2018. We'll make sure that you have a link, access to the link, and also to list this little photo. So the United States now actually has dropped out of the top 10. So this is what's kind of crazy. So I'm going to read to you the list of the top countries. So your top countries are South Korea is the first most innovative country, and they were also ranked there in 2017. Sweden, Singapore. So Singapore is actually elevated from 6 to 3 in the last year. Germany, Switzerland, Japan, Finland, Denmark, France, Israel, the United States. The United States is number 11. So when we think Silicon Valley is such an innovative place, according to Bloomberg anyway, in this innovation index, the United States is actually falling behind and is now only in the top 11th. And so we dropped actually 2 spots from 2017 to 2018. And for me, I think that was kind of a shocking number. I never would have thought we would have been out of the top 5, top 3, but to know we're number 11. So we want to kind of use this as something that we're going to dig into as we're developing this content, because why are we not in the top of the innovation anymore? What are we doing that's making us fall behind? When you think of like in this thing, it gives you all sorts of different breakdowns, whether it's the, R&D, whether it's productivity, high-tech density, and so forth. So we're number one in high-tech density, but when it comes to other aspects, we're falling. And obviously we've fallen. I'm sure we used to be at 1 at some point, and now we're sitting here all the way on 11. You hear a lot about China in the news, but China is number 19 and Russia is number 25. So in a sense, the politics right now where you hear so much about these countries, they're kind of gaining on us and we're falling backward.
What I think is weird is like if China is 19, but Italy is 20, like you don't ever think of Italy as, at least I don't, as an innovative world changer, but it's only one off of China, who I would have assumed would have been much higher.
Right. So I also want to point out something here. If you think of the distribution of these countries, and there'll be another little image that we show out of this particular document, but how many of them are in Northern Europe? Mm-hmm. So Sweden, Finland, Denmark, it's interesting. So one thing that we're going to dive into over the course of our podcast or our show is what is going on in the educational systems and the environment that's creating this kind of level of innovation. I mean, innovation is what drives an economy forward, right? If we were not innovative, we would still be cranking out buggies and wooden wheels for wagons. And it's the innovation that allows us to capture economic growth, that allows a flourishing for our citizens, and really making the world a better place, we hope. And here we are as the United States, falling behind, and we want to understand what's going on there and what lessons we can learn from Sweden, which is number 2, Germany's 3, no, Germany's 4, Switzerland 5, Finland 7, Denmark 8. Like, wow, what are they doing? They're gaining and gaining and gaining, and here we are going backward.
Well, and I look at that from an education standpoint of really studying self-directed learning and alternative education. A lot of those top 10 countries offer and support alternative education in different formats. And they've changed their education systems over the last so many years to really support innovation, whereas a lot of the other countries are not really to the point of addressing it yet, or they're just starting to recognize that there's a need for change.
So are we cultivating our versions of Misfits today? If you think about it that way, are you cultivating a misfit type of an environment at your home? Are you rewarding those? Some of those more than others. So,
please.
But no, that's not true. Totally. My mom, we're not really cultivating the 4-year-old.
You don't need to.
No, we don't need to. He's cultivating us.
Naturally a Leonardo.
So self-directed learning, are you rewarding coloring outside the lines, if you will, in your home and in your workplace? What are you doing to not establish an environment of conformity? Right. I think those are some of the questions that we have to start thinking about, because we're looking for that innovation. We're not looking right now to just be another great worker country where other people innovate amazing ideas and they send it to us so that we can just process it for them. And frankly, that's kind of what we've done to the rest of the world for so long. We invented this amazing stuff. Okay, you build it. We come up with the next idea and you keep on building it. And then here we are flipping around. And eventually we'll get to the point like, sure, we can run those systems for you. You have to keep on inventing new stuff so that we get to work for you, I hope. Right?
Right.
So I think there's so much conformity at school. There's so much conformity at work. And I see that in entrepreneurs because they can't leave their job. They can't figure out how to fail. They don't know. That sense of risk taking is so small because everyone in their environment looks at them like they're crazy.
Well, if it goes back to being a child, were you rewarded for answering a question that the teacher asked if you were incorrect, or were you chastised, or like? How was it? So many school environments, they don't encourage curiosity. They don't encourage questions. They want you to know what's written in the book, answer it, and move on. Whereas if you look at entrepreneurs' ability to really think and be non-conforming, you have to be able to take that risk and just approach everything with curiosity and willing to learn from it, whether you're wrong or right.
And, you'll hear a lot of our conversation here, and we'll reference back to school because, of course, as we deal with Leonardo's education, we link it to today. But this is not against school. We're not against school, and I'm not definitely against school. But for me, what's interesting is that the environment that the school has been created to become forces teachers to not reward this nonconformity, to not try to establish an environment where a child's natural interest comes out, because the teacher is so pinned down with trying to get this kind of a standardized test and this kind of a homework done and this kind of thing, and they don't have the resources. Right. So they don't even have the resources to do what they're asked to do, let alone if we were to understand that an environment that allowed more flexibility in the learning styles and in the self-expression would actually, like, it's actually less intensive to do from a teaching perspective, and at the same time allows the teacher to do what they've always wanted to do, which is have their kids flourish. And I think that's a really interesting thing. So,
but like if you tie that back to not even just school, but society in general, for so many years, the statement was children were to be seen and not heard. So, and there was so much of this puritanistic bent pushed down in authoritarianism onto children that their opinion, their curiosity, their ability to make decisions, it wasn't encouraged in most families and in most environments. Religious centers, it's not just school systems. So that whole statement of it was good enough for us, it should be good enough for you, I hate it with a passion, because everything changes. And what might have been good for my parents' generation might not even be applicable to my generation, and definitely not for the next generation. And so I think that in cultivating Misfits and Rebels, we have to encourage people to ask those questions. Is this still relevant? Does it matter? And if not, what does? What should happen? Like in our parents' generation, there was so much in acceptance of, race, sexual orientation, all of that stuff. It was a whole different conversation than now. And our kids, it's just part of their everyday conversation.
I know some people might say, well, yeah, that's why the United States is falling apart, or,
Maybe.
Sure. Everybody can have their own opinion, but I will just stick specifically on the fact that innovation is not happening in the United States at the level that it used to have, and we should be concerned about that above anything else, right? Innovation is a big statement, and it relates to whether it's different kinds of technology, different kinds of concepts, R&D, right? All of these other things. So if you think creating a child or creating an environment so a child has to do the same things in a certain way all the time, you're rewarding them for doing that. Anytime they step outside of that, they get punished. If they fail at school, but yet they put a good effort, and yet that causes them to be in trouble.
Yeah.
And then you're expecting at 21 years old, after $100,000 of investment in school, that they come out and all of a sudden they're innovative and they're rebel and they're connecting the dots across disciplines. I don't think you've stepped back and really looked at the big picture at a 30,000 foot view. I don't think you're actually looking at going, for 21 years from day one to now 21 years later, this child has been told that they have to be prim and proper, or like Jannica said, hey, you have to act like us. It's good for us. It should be good for you. Being a rebel is not good, but hey, now we need you to be a rebel so you can thrive in the workforce, so you can help the company become innovative and make more money and success. Exactly. So your stock options can go up, so you can actually be in the middle class or above, or start your own company. So now figure that out when you're 24 years old, ready, set, go. And it just doesn't happen. And I think that's why we have so many entrepreneurs that when finally they have the courage to start their own business, 80% of them fail, because those people are the rebels sitting around that had wanted and needed this kind of fostering and nurturing all this time. And it's really important to know, Leonardo didn't go from I'm drawing in my, on stolen sheets of paper to all of a sudden I'm doing the Mona Lisa. That's not what happened. He went through an apprenticeship. It was a very slow, structured learning experience for him, right? And he was already talented going into that, but then still learning about the business from inside. Even when his apprenticeship was done, as we said in the previous episode, he didn't leave. So it was that environment that was happening. So I don't know, I don't want to beat this too much, but the reality is you can see it. The proof is in the pudding, as it says. And since we're falling in behind in innovation, we need to think really carefully about what are we doing to the next generation. What are we doing to the 50-year-old who wants to start a business? When I say next generation, I mean that's where we obviously have to invest heavily into the lives of our kids and those coming behind us. But there's so many people that finally have the courage to want to jump out, and they need to come into an environment that's going to support them, that's going to nurture that, because so many times the minute that they come out, what ends up happening is, you've probably experienced this in some sense yourself, is that there is this really big desire in so many people right now to express themselves through business or through art, and their friends and family might say, well, who are you to do that? Mm-hmm. Or who gives you the authority to do this? Who gives you the permission to do that? Do you think you're so special?
Or you're really stupid for taking that risk. Like, you're putting everything your family has at risk and at jeopardy. Or, why are you pursuing your passions and taking time away from your family? You should be working and spending time at home. The environment I think that so many people go through, or the experience, is not supportive. And that ties back to...
Well, that's why we're doing what we're doing, because I think it's so important for us is... ultimately, if you listen to even just one of these episodes and you look at the life of Leonardo da Vinci and say, wow, that was such an amazing, impactful person, and there's just few little traits that you can grab from the way he lived his life or the environment that he lived in, and you can bring any of that into your workforce, at home, like, mission accomplished for us. That's what this is about.
Yeah.
So one of Janica's favorite lines, and I like to read it.
My favorite.
So that way she can just nod and be happy, is, above all, Leonardo's relentless curiosity and experimentation should remind us of the importance of distilling in both ourselves and our children, not just received knowledge, but a willingness to question it, to be imaginative, and like talented misfits and rebels in any era, to think different. One thing I want to add to that, if I may, Walter, is it's combining the different concepts, right? It's not just about receiving knowledge, because right now I could pull up any kind of knowledge on my phone. It's not just the knowledge, it's what do you do with the knowledge?
Exactly.
So,
and then crossing it over to the other disciplines.
Yes, exactly. When you're sitting there and you're 15 years old right now, do you understand the connections between biology and chemistry and math?
Right.
Can you start thinking about science projects that are blending some of those things together? Or, and I keep this one around here, are you trying to get a participant ribbon in the science fair because you've at 12, 13, 15 years old, you're still trying to figure out what causes ice to melt faster, cold weather or hot weather? And these are the kind of things that are being allowed to be passed as science projects. And I'm not joking. I actually judged one last year, and those were things that 12 and 13-year-olds were doing. Right? Instead of really pondering some really advanced concepts and merging them together, and you say, well, I don't know how to do that. Well, that's the problem. That's why you can innovate, and that's why you can get out of the box, because you literally have to be spoon-fed every bit of information.
So I have something to add to that.
Please.
I think is a good example. Scarlett, my 11-year-old, is very much like Leonardo. Definitely a misfit. Lots of learning disabilities. And she has always gravitated towards things that had to do with mixing stuff. So mixing colors together. She never did black, white, red. They all got mixed together. Legos all got mixed together. And yet she would then go and organize stuff so it was perfect in order. So she had this weird combination. But as I watched her develop, everything she did, she would go out and if it was dry dirt, she would go get water and mix it to create mud. Or she would dump sand into the pool. Like, she was always mixing things. And it became so fascinating until recently I started watching her put it all together. And with cooking, she doesn't measure stuff, but she knows. She's like, well, this little bit will make it thicker. And she was making a gravy, which I still can't make. But she was like, oh, well, if I put this much water, it's going to make it really wet. But if I put this much flour or cornstarch, whatever, it's going to make it thick. And I was like, how do you know that? She's like, well, it's like with mud. It's what I do with mud. And I'm like, oh my God, it just like all connected. And same with like what she does to her hair with the different colors she puts in it. She mixes it all together. So it's all these different disciplines and subjects of interest to her that she then has tied together. It fascinated me.
And that's actually how a lot of these crazy inventions are happening.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
These really weird, different concepts come together. And some of the best food out there, right? Like the fusion foods right now are so popular.
Yeah.
Instead of the standard meat and potatoes, you're like, well, how about if we do this? And what do we try that? And what do we mix this? So anyways, so we're going to leave you with some things to do at home. These are some fun ideas that you can take even to your workplace, really, and really start fostering a different environment, maybe, that's bringing around conversations around innovation or being a rebel, right? So you want to go down the list or alternate?
So when you're out to dinner with someone or when you meet someone at a networking event, you don't know what to talk about, ask them what they failed at recently. Ask them what risks they've taken.
What if they're going to make fun of me? Oh. Like, seriously,
So
guys,
sad.
get over the failure thing. You care more about your failures than anybody else cares about your failures. So you,
Use them as a role model. Use your failure as an example, as a teaching lesson.
Push the boundaries of creativity. Just simply that. So if you're doing some art or your child is doing some art, ask them, try to push that to something that's a little bit different. Actually, consciously focus on being creative and combining topics.
So I love this one. It's being intentional about asking questions about what's common and ordinary in your life. So one of the things that Leonardo wrote in his journal was why is the sky blue, or did we just write that?
No, it's why is the sky blue.
Why is the sky blue? I thought so. So questions like that. Why is water in a lake green or blue or brown? When you're walking down the street and you're observing, the wind blowing out the window as you stick your hand out the window, like, why does your hand move a certain way? Asking all those questions that are just normal, like, who came up with the idea of a fork? Why do we use a fork the way it is? Is there a better invention than the fork? We've used that forever. Just questions. And if you talk like that with your family, especially little kids, oh my gosh, their imagination will take them so far. You'll have an amazing conversation around who knows what. Like,
yeah, I like the question, why is the sky blue? If you think about it, how many of you think about that kind of stuff? So he had written down in his document in his notebook a bunch of really weird questions. So here's another one. What did you observe today that you normally do not see? So I think that's really fascinating and really interesting. Is what is it that's happening in your day? So here's a misfit, my misfit wife, making faces at us from the window. Anyways, so what did you observe today that you normally don't observe? So if you think about your drive to work, instead of taking the same drive to work that you normally do, maybe you tweak it up a little bit, change it up a little bit, and as you're driving, consciously think about, why is this here? What is that? Why did that plant grow in that weird format?
Why does it have pointed leaves versus rounded leaves?
That was a good question.
Why?
I don't know. So that kind of questioning is what Leonardo was doing all the time, wondering why. Like a 4-year-old. Mm-hmm. Like a 4-year-old.
Like a 4-year-old.
Next one.
So I love this. Walter says the reason Leonardo wanted to know, such as about the tongue of a woodpecker, is because he was Leonardo, curious, passionate, and always filled with wonder. I love that. If we live life with curiosity and passion and wonder, oh my God, how much fun each day would be.
That's right. So at home, of course, it's fostering, again, curiosity and just wondering about things, right? Mm-hmm. Also curiosity, right? So the last one is, we'd love to challenge you to think about world changers, the famous people, the ones that made a difference to the world, that everybody knows, the ones that you read their quotes on Instagram. And in some senses, for some of those, they became wealthy. Which world changers are not rebels or misfits? So I'd like you to think about that, because I think you'll find that that's a pretty hard exercise. So we left you with some exercises to do here. And
you can download them on our website.
Oh, that's right. Absolutely. So if you text Da Vinci, if you text Da Vinci to 38470, we'll send you a list of these things that you can do at home.
Becoming Da Vinci.
If you want to know more about the Becoming Da Vinci show, check us out on Instagram at Becoming Da Vinci, or go look at our website at becomingdavinchishow.com.
Or send us some hate mail at hello@becomingdavincishow.com.
Becoming Da Vinci.
So we're going to put this out there. If you know anybody that should be covered on this show, please let us know. We're looking for people that are innovative, whether they have a business or not. Maybe they're a school teacher. Maybe they're just that cool grandma down the street that has just really figured out how to make amazing tomatoes grow in her backyard. So we're looking for self-directed learners. We're looking for innovative people who are always learning and trying new things. So please reach out to us at hello@becomingdavincishow.com.
Join us next time as we learn more about Leonardo and modern day entrepreneurs.